Good afternoon. My name is Emma Mitchell and I'm Marketing Executive at Eclipse Group. Thank you for taking the time out to attend this webinar on Infor BI entitled Eliminating Excel Chaos in Planning, Analysis and Forecasting Processes. I am joined this afternoon by our business partner Richard Keyser from Corporate Financial Management Systems, who will be presenting an overview and demonstration of the solution. After the presentation, in around 45 minutes' time, I'll be taking any questions you may have. I will now pass you over to Richard.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll put up an agenda what we're going to cover. I think we've done the introductions. I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the theory and the terminology of this solution. Tell you a little bit more about cubes, which is the type of architecture that we use. I'll then spend or go into the demonstration proper, having a look at the software itself. Interestingly enough, and I think this is a big benefit, there are two front ends to the software. We can either retain the spreadsheet front end, or we can have a slightly snazzier, for want of a better word, front end, the graphical front end. That can be fully addressed in a browser. It seems to be the way the market is going, both for data entry, as you may well want to do in a planning exercise, but also for reporting. Then hand back to Emma for a sort of a question and answer session at the end. So if we start with just looking at some of the customers that use this solution, we can see it's applicable to customers pretty much across the board in terms of the vertical market, and also in terms of size of organisation. It is an eminently scalable product, and hopefully you'll see some users there that you recognise. For those Sun users out there, we have plenty of users using it with Sun accounts. It is an Infor product, but not only Sun accounts. The one thing that our customers tend to have in common, and this is really where we start with the title of today's seminar, is they're all using spreadsheets to do their planning, their reporting activities, and they're really hitting the sort of limitations of Excel, if you will. And it makes their applications, as we put, chaotic at the worst case, but certainly less than robust, difficult to maintain, difficult to analyze across. You know, the typical spreadsheet issues. And in a sense, that's what we address. And we do it with multidimensional solution, with cubing structures, which I'm sure you've all heard of. But I just wanted to start by talking a little bit about the terminology and looking at how data is stored in cubes, because it's the way data is stored now that addresses, in a sense, those chaotic spreadsheets. So if we start with the terminology, I'll start with the first bullet point, a dimension. That's your core business structure. That's your reporting structures, and it could be regions, accounts, months, customers, products, versions, currencies. Anything you want to report by is a dimension. Dimensions are made up of elements. I think that's self-explanatory. There we have three member elements of the dimensions above. Yeah. Our type of database, we call them cubes. Now, I'm sure you've all heard the term cube, but essentially it's a multi-dimensional database as opposed to a relational database, such as SQL Server that sits under Sun, Great Plains, and many of the transactional systems, not only financials, that we can take feed from. When we store data in these cubes or multi-dimensional databases, it lends itself to modeling, to analytical applications, to what-if type of reporting. We tend to store business in different cubes around different business processes. So we may have a detailed sales or income cube. We may have a detailed payroll cube, but we take the nets into our management accounts cube, where we run our P&L type reports. We can move from cube to cube, so to the end user that appears as drill down, so drill down to more detail. But we're storing data in different cubes. We have the ability, because we're modeling, to input calculations, to derive numbers. That's very important, obviously, when we're in planning. Syntactically, our formulas, they're going to look similar, or rules as we call them, to formulas in spreadsheets, but they're locked away in the cube. They're not in the front end anymore. End users, therefore, cannot muck them up. Good technical term. And then we support a multi-cube, as we've alluded to, architecture. I'm just going to build a cube on screen so you can visualize how data is stored. There's our first dimension. These dimensions are clearly going to be the user's structures, and they would by and large be maintained from your transactional system. So if you change something on, say, Sun, next time you do a download into this for reporting purposes, it will have changed here as well. It's self-maintaining. In our solution, our structures look like that. Yeah, and you can see the key thing here is the hierarchy takes place along the dimension. We no longer have suites of linked spreadsheets adding up numbers or copying and pasting into linked spreadsheets. Therefore, we have robust systems. There's another dimension. In that case, it's our accounts dimension, partial, only so much room on screen. And there's a third dimension. In this case, it's a month dimension. Bring them together to form a cube or database. Yeah, and this, of course, is why we call our cubes cubes. And the idea of now is that the numbers are stored at the intersections within this cube that we have created or defined by creating our the cube from our reporting structures. So we're not storing data as part of a record anymore. We're storing data at these intersections that we created in the cube. So the number for gross margin Manchester May would be stored probably about there where I've dropped my cursor, at the intersection within the volume of the cube. The number for salary expense Manchester May would be stored about there, presumably vertically below the last point. I'm not great at pointing into 3D structures, but hopefully you get the idea. Yeah. So we're storing data at the intersections within the cube. By making a cube or building a cube from our reporting structures, we've created a whole series of intersections or data points where we can store numbers. What we're looking at, this is going to confuse issues a bit, is a three-dimensional cube. We can have up to 20 dimensions in our cubes. Guess what? I can't draw a 20-dimensional cube in the PowerPoint. I can't draw a 4-dimensional cube in the PowerPoint. But let's say we want to move from this 3-dimensional cube to a 4-dimensional cube. That means one further way to sort your data. The obvious dimension to add at this moment in time would be a version dimension with budget, actual, forecast 1, forecast 2, forecast 3 as the elements of that new dimension. Just think in terms of the intersections. In this cube, all our intersections are defined by 3 elements. In the new cube, all our intersections will be defined by 4 elements, 1 from each of our dimensions. So where we have gross margin Manchester May in this cube, in our new cube we may well have gross margin Manchester May budget, or gross margin Manchester May actual, or gross margin Manchester May June's forecast. Yeah. Add a 5th dimension, and I'm not going to go past 5 or we'll be here all day. And let's say we want to add a year dimension so we can look backwards and forwards. In the new cube, all the intersections will be defined by 5 elements, 1 from each of our dimensions. And where we have gross margin Manchester May budget in our 4-dimensional cube, in our 5-dimensional cube, we might have gross margin Manchester May budget 210, 211, 212, 213, 214. And so on. I'm not going to carry on. Hopefully you get the idea. By adding more dimensions, more ways to sort your data. It's been a very long time since I've seen more than 10 dimensions in a cube. Where can we take data from? Well, anywhere really. Any of your transactional systems. I put Sun and ProAxis up there, but it can be any ledgers, any ERPs, any CRM system. It doesn't really matter. We have full ODBC compliance. For some accounts, coupling is going to be tight because it is an Infor product, but we have a full-blown ETL tool that will link to any data source, or even a data warehouse if you have a data warehouse, or text files, flat files, or other spreadsheets. Yeah. So it will link directly into these sources, and you can schedule downloads of data, whether that be daily, weekly, monthly, or run monthly, or run manually if you made some, for instance, month-end adjustments and you want to refresh your cubes. Very importantly, we can key numbers in as well. This isn't just a reporting tool, this is a planning tool as well. So you can have your budget holders keying their numbers into the budget slots in the cube. You can be downloading your actuals into the cube. Those budget numbers will be aggregated along the dimension in the cube, and then you've got actuals and budgets there sitting there, so you can do your variance analysis. Step further, because you've got actuals and budgets, we've got the core ingredients to start automating the forecast process, and I'll show you that as part of the review, part of the demonstration. Once the numbers are in the cube, we can slice and dice them any which way we want to, and that's meant to represent and there's no rekeying of data, there's no copying and pasting, there's no using nasty tricky pivot tables. It's very simple to do it, and that's meant to be a report or slice of Manchester's numbers for those accounts over and across for April and May. Our report would look something like that. Summarising them, numbers in cubes, we can have up to 20 dimensions in the cube. We can actually store 1 million elements along a dimension, so we can have no practical limit to data storage in the cube. Yeah. Over here we've got some models made up of a number of cubes with a flow between them. Yeah. So they would be sitting on the server machine that would be serving the client machine. Now the client machine can be either a spreadsheet, finance guys love spreadsheets, or looking at the same numbers in the same cube. It can be the graphical front end that can be a thick client or in a browser. I guess a lot of applications are now delivered in browser because you don't have to load software on your machines. It makes life a lot easier. Just open up IE or your favorite browser. Alternatively, we can run the application on mobile devices, either in, if it's say an iPad, using Safari web services, or there's an app. Yeah, so you've got a number of options. You have the delivery spectrum that you would expect in 2013, but it's all about numbers stored at intersections in cubes. That's really what this seminar is about, putting numbers at intersections in cubes, making them far more flexible and robust. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to hold that cube in your mind's eye, and it's probably time I stop waffling and actually opened up the software to show you the software. I'm going to start with the spreadsheet front end, yeah, because it's more open. It's far more flexible as well. So you finance guys probably be quite happy working in the spreadsheet front end. You can use the spreadsheet functionality. You can do calculations in the spreadsheet if you wish. Most repetitive calculations are done in the cube. Yeah. You can do the sort of things you really wouldn't want your budget holders doing, so you put them in a browser that's slightly more controlled. But we're going to start here with the spreadsheet front end. I'm running Excel 2010, as you can see. It'll run with any version of Excel. You could give or take. There's some very early versions that aren't. It will also, you can have a heterogeneous network because the numbers aren't in the spreadsheet. They're out back in the cube. It's just the front end. When you use the spreadsheet front end, as you can see, it's just an add-in to Excel with all your functionality in the ribbon. Slightly different if you're still 203, but that's the general idea. You can use all the spreadsheet features. None of them are compromised, and I put a graph on here. Not the prettiest of graphs, but I put a graph on here just using the spreadsheet charting features. If we look at the grid of numbers, the numbers themselves are not in the spreadsheet or the report anymore. They're out back in the cube, but being viewed through the spreadsheet, so subtly different. So these numbers are out back in the cube. These calculations are done in the cube as well. I'm not summing numbers in the spreadsheet, but as I mentioned earlier, happy to do sort of ad hoc calculations over here if you want to. So just for, can't think of a good reason, you wanted to add in May and second quarter, you could do it here in the spreadsheet. I probably wouldn't put that in the cube because it's a bit skew and you probably wouldn't use it all the time. But you can do it. If we look at this report, what we notice straight away, and hopefully you can all see this, there are actually 4 dimensions represented in the report, and they are in the body of the report months, yeah, January, February, March, first quarter, April, May, June, second quarter, are 8 elements of my month dimension. I've got some accounts running down the left-hand side of the page, but up here I have 2 further accounts. Version, I happen to be looking at budget, and region, I happen to be looking at Liverpool. As I was about to say, we call these index dimensions because you only see one value on screen at any one time, but if you double click, you get a drop down and you can navigate around your dimensions. You can have full security around dimensions, so if someone's only responsible for Liverpool or for that cost center or for that set of accounts, that's all they see. But you can, if you have full security, as you would back at base or full rights, navigate around. That's entirely up to you. Similarly, we get a drop down here. So those are index dimensions. When we use the report writer, we have full control whether we make a dimension index or bring it into the body of the report. But what you can see straight away is what we have is the equivalent of many spreadsheets here compressed into one. So we're not storing lots of spreadsheets anymore. We're storing this template once, and people can use it according to their security rights. We also have control when we use the report writer what elements to show in the body of the report. This could have been my full P&L, this could have been my full year. I chose for this set report just to take those accounts and those months. Yeah. So that's the idea, but we have total control how we present our reports when we use the report writer or browser, as you'll see in a minute. When I click on a number, this is the important bit, and why I built that cube in the PowerPoint. What we see in the cell is not the number, it's a lookup pointing to the intersection in the cube, and every cell has one of these lookups, even these calculated cells, because the calculation takes place in the cube, and the number is read to screen via the lookup. And what this pointer is, or lookup, is looking at is that intersection that we were pointing at in the cube. You never have to write these, the report writer generates them. In the graphical front end, the non-spreadsheet front end, you can't even see them, although they're there, because you don't have a formula bar as such. But if I just push F2 now, you can clearly see what this reference is budget, Liverpool, DP equipment rental in January from our management accounts cube. So it finds the cube and then looks at that intersection and brings that number to screen. If I click over here and push F2, you see it references, in this case, as you'd expect from the management accounts cube, budget, Liverpool, information expense, second quarter. But that is how multi-dimensional solutions work, and you've probably seen those type of lookups before. Therefore, I think it's clear now that if I was to change from Liverpool to Manchester, I'm not going to, but if I did, Manchester would appear in this cell, all the pointers in the lookup would point to this cell, yeah, read Manchester, not Liverpool, and bring back Manchester's numbers to the grid, and that's how you change the numbers in the screen. Yeah. Now, because the numbers are out back and the calculation in the cube and the calculations are done in the cube, not in the spreadsheet anymore, or the front end, if I don't want certain items on screen, such as those base items, I can just delete them. But second quarter, you'll note, will still calculate correctly. Yeah, this is quite important, because one of the big spreadsheet bugbears of mine is you do have to have lots of, they tend to grow, they tend to involve. You get lots of numbers, lots of base items in the spreadsheet because you want to do calculations. You don't have to do that anymore. So if you want concise spreadsheets, this will do that for you. Yeah. Moreover, if you want to tweak numbers, as you may well want to do when you're sort of budgeting or you're changing forecasts, they calculate really quickly because those calculations are done in the cube. You don't have to go and get a cup of tea while it recalculates the numbers anymore. I said that tongue-in-cheek, but I'm sure you've probably been there. Okay, so that's the idea. That's the architecture. That's how things fit together. Let's quickly move on to budgeting. When we're budgeting, we want to present either our finance staff or end users, budget holders, with a grid and get them to enter their numbers. Yeah. Any report we produce in our system, we can make a data entry screen. Most you wouldn't want to. This may be a good example of a data entry screen. So let's say we can here. Okay, if you don't want to, you don't make them editable, but any you can. So this is going to be my data entry screen. Needless to say, if we were looking at my actuals over here, I'm not going to switch to actuals, they'd be frozen. You can't change your actuals, yeah, well you shouldn't be anyway, but budget numbers, yes. Before we start changing numbers, it's very important, I stress, we have full security, full workflow, full audit trail. We have the controls in place you need when you've got a flexible system that changes the numbers. And those controls and the security in the cube, so they apply to whatever front end you're using. Yeah? So if I was looking at this in the graphical front end or in the browser or on my iPad, if I was only allowed to see Liverpool, I'd only be able to see Liverpool. So let's assume I'm Mr. Liverpool. I'm going to come here and I'm going to change these numbers. I'm going to change that to 60,000. Hit return. It accepts my number. Note it hasn't overwritten the lookup, it's a two-way lookup, and because I have security access to enable me to change Liverpool, it sends the numbers down the intersection. It's down the lookup. It's a two-way lookup, and it did overwrite the 40,000 that I had there before. Yeah. So that number is now in the cube. Yeah. Not back on your ledgers, but in the cube. And in the cube, any numbers dependent on that, like that, and that, will recalculate in real time. If I was looking at a report for total or Northern England, they would also recalculate in real time. If I was looking here at my variance report, that would calculate in real time. If I was looking at my P&L, my full P&L, my cash flow, my balance sheet, there's a flow through your model, or anybody else was looking at that, they would recalculate in real time. So by changing this number, it's changing any other number number derived from this number, recalculating that in real time because it's RAM based, and if you happen to be looking at a report that uses that derived number, you'll see it change. I think you actually, if you're in the web front end, you have to refresh, but that's because of the web. Yeah, but the numbers are recalculated. But that's the idea. So we can start entering our numbers. Yeah, we can also, if I type a number in here, I don't know why I always gravitate to 666, a bit worrying, hit return, that's calculated. So under normal circumstances, it won't accept that. However, if we go to Infor, they have, bless them, I don't know why they've called it Splasher, doesn't quite sound right to me, but they've put in a utility called Splasher, which by default is switched off. Great tool, but don't give it to everyone. And if I switch it on here, and most people wouldn't be able to do that, I could then type a number in here. I'm not going to do it now, but I could type a number in here and it would splash it back over the elements below it. It usually picks up the profile. Yeah, so it looks at the profile below and it splashes the number here over those numbers. If I splashed in this cell, it would affect all the numbers in the grid, again by the overall profile. And if I go higher up here to total, to one of the aggregated levels, it would affect all the regions below. So the higher up you go, the more numbers you change. You can also, it's got a number of additional features. I could type a number in here like Manchester and it would pick up Manchester's profile. Yeah, so if we were opening up a new store, or we thought this contract was going to perform appreciably like that contract, you use the other contract or group as a control profile. Or you can type numbers into this year's budget, like last year's actual, but put income up by 2%. Yeah, it's that type of tool. Very flexible, very powerful, not to be given to everyone. No. So we can work top down as well as bottom up. Moving on. So I won't go there, I'll go there. We want, typically in budgeting, we want people working together, but at the same time collaboratively. So I'm now going to change to Manchester, and Manchester, or the person responsible for Manchester, can be changing Manchester's numbers either through the spreadsheet or the graphical front end in the browser at the same time as I'm working on Liverpool's numbers, at the same time as your guy in Hong Kong's entering his numbers on his iPad. Yeah, they're all being sent back to the cube. Security can be set, so if Manchester's only allowed to see Manchester, that's all that appears in this list. And that makes life easier for the person responsible for Manchester because they don't have to wade through everybody else's regions or cost centres or whatever the dimension is, however you divide up the responsibility. Yeah, it's also great for you because you've got control. Yeah. So whilst those guys are entering their numbers, we can be here at an aggregated net level, and we'll always be up to date. We'll always see the latest numbers, except, as I said, if you're in the browser, because you probably have to refresh. But you will always be, the numbers will be updated. They just need refreshing, and that's great because whilst you probably don't want to sit there during the budget process watching all the guys, 10, 20, 30 people changing their numbers and having an effect on your screen, certainly at a later stage you do want to tweak a number here, see what the effect is up here, make a decision based on that, and then start perhaps a dialogue with the budget holder so that we meet the targets that you need to be met. So that's the idea. The key thing though is the aggregation of these numbers takes place along the dimension. No longer suites are linked or spreadsheets or copying into the master spreadsheets. Okay, moving on. When we're budgeting, we very often have, this can be a bit frustrating, numbers in more than one report at any one time. So I can see these numbers in this report. I can see these numbers if I open up another report in this report. You can see they're the same, but with spreadsheets you very often get out of sync, and it's extremely frustrating because of course what you do, you change a number there, you don't change a number there, you start to get out of sync. That clearly with our solution can't happen because the numbers aren't actually in any report, they're out back in the cube. So if I put them both on screen at the same time, so if I change a number, oh, I don't want that, let's just get rid of that one, view again. If I change a number in either of these reports, and it may well be though that you actually make one report so you can't edit it, your more complete report, but if I change a number here, I'm going to make it 10,000, hit return now, it sends it back to the cube and it's red over here, as you can see, it's changed down here. Yeah? And in that way you will always remain consistency. It's uncanny, isn't it, how sales guys' version of their numbers never ever ever seem to match the finance guys' version of the same numbers. If I'm back at base and I'm looking at the numbers over here through this report, as I said, you could freeze this report or you could actually make it editable. Yeah, so I can send the number back to the budget holder and I can actually edit a very polite note, which clearly shouldn't be used for trading insults. It should be used to explain why you changed the number, and that note is actually stored. We have multidimensional notes with the number, so wherever you use that number, that note will be, or you can attach a document. So you can, if you're in more detailed level, go down and bring up the invoice, a scanned image of, for instance, the invoice, or a link to where you've scanned it. Yeah. Okay, moving on. We can now just close that. We can now drill up and drill down if you want to in the spreadsheet along the dimension, or importantly, we can drill through to more detail. I've actually got all my staff costs, salary line items in a detail cube. I'm not going to open that up, but I will open up my sales cube, and you can clearly see here. And this, okay, we've got products here, but it can be contracts, it can be rates against people. The assumptions can be currencies as well. But you can clearly see my sales for individual products. Here I'm looking at weekly data by individual products, so in much more detail than you'd have in your P&L. This is my sales cube, but the numbers flow through to here and are consistent. I've also calculated my cost of sales as, well, you can see it's actually 10%, but as dependent on the on the sales. But typically it isn't the sales that you're changing. It's probably going to be assumptions. Yeah, and it may be, in this case, the assumptions of volumes and unit prices, but as I said, they could be assumptions around currency, assumptions around payroll, assumptions around rates and things like that. So it may be that your commercial guys can see volumes, but they can't actually see the unit prices. You hold those back at base, and we'll make that a very large one. Yeah. Or, of course, we could use Splasher to increase for all fruits for ASDA or for all customers by 2%. But we'll make that a large number. That's had a knock-on effect on the net sales. Yeah. And usually you would be splashing maybe across the full quarter even, or the full year, or to the end of the year, up by 2%. But that's had a knock-on effect, as you can see on our sales, and that number is black by formatting. It's excessive, isn't it? But you can see that numbers now flow through to there, and similarly for the total of the first quarter. And you can see that the cost of sales is a function of sales. Yeah, these rules can be as complex or as simple as you want, but it shows you that whilst those guys are working at the low level, we're still consistent up here with our high level numbers. Yeah. So there's a flow from detailed cubes to, and it allows you to work at different levels. Once you've got your numbers in, once you've done your budget collation, you're probably going to want to report out on them. So I'm very, very quickly going to show you the report writer. This is very simple to use. It's a drag and drop report writer. You have a similar idea in the spreadsheet, the non-spreadsheet front end, which I'll show you when we open it up. But I'm just going to open the report writer up. There's our report writer. Hopefully you can all see it. It's just a drag and drop report writer. It works similar to a pivot table, but of course what you're actually doing is you're pivoting all the data in the cube. You don't have to bring all the data in the spreadsheet, so it's far more robust. At any level we can drill down to more detail. Yeah, and let's open that up. What I'm going to do quickly, just to show you how easy it is to use, is recreate that first report. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about the graph. There's no reason why you can't pivot graphs as well. Yeah, I think it's pointless, but you can't do. I'm just going to worry about the grid. I'm going to select first off my first 2 quarters, just to show you how easy reporting becomes. And only those, because that's all I want. And I decided I'm going to move my elements so that I see my first quarters at the bottom of their respective quarters. That's how I want it. Fantastic. Click OK. Yeah, and there's no reason for reporting purposes why you can't stay in this. I create some set reports in the spreadsheet, but you could stay in this environment. You can save the definitions of your report at any level. I'm now going to just select the accounts that I want. Simple as that. Yeah, and it affects this. I'm now going to flip the axes, because I said originally had my months, as you'll recall, across the top, and we get in there. I'm now going to bring that into the body of the report to show you how easy to create an indented report, and do it that way. Or maybe put that over there. You get the idea. Very, very simple. But it may be you only want actual budget and variance, so we'll select actual budget and variance, and you just see actual budget and variance. So you can create your reports in seconds. Yeah. I'm now going to plonk that back up there as a would. Yeah. And we'll just check that the numbers are coming from the same database or cube. They are, of course. We'll drill down, yeah, and you'll recognise these numbers when you see them. For Liverpool, there's my 60, there's my note, there's the 40, there's the 50 that we were looking at before. But it's that simple to create our reports. Once you can do that, is you can just slice them into a spreadsheet in that way. Anyone can use this according to their security rights. But this is just a spreadsheet, and you can do whatever you want with these spreadsheets. It's really that simple. What you can also do, not so disciplined, but I know people do it, it's a quick way of changing reports, is, and you can stop people doing this, is the lookups are handled like any other formula in any spreadsheet, so we just copy these across, yeah, put them in that cell and then type in third quarter or August or whatever we want. And it'll just brings back those numbers. So once you've got a formula, you can just copy it. Yeah, makes life very simple. So that's reporting. Yeah, on the budget numbers. Once you've got your budget numbers into the cube and you've authorised your budget, let's move on to 2 months, and we're going to do a forecast. Yeah, this will show you how straightforward this is. Yeah, I'm going to open up my forecasting cockpit, and this just allows us to create any forecast. So I'm going to select my budget numbers, which I'm going to use as the basis, and I'm going to just create, I don't like, we call it February forecast 1. Yeah, and I'm just going to add that in. Yeah, before I do anything else, just have a look at my reports now. You will note that for all my reports, they now have a February forecast 1. There won't be any numbers in there, and if I drill through, I can come down here, and that has a February forecast 1, and that will be the same for my my assumptions, now whether it's volume or whether it's unit price. If I look at that other report, or any report in my entire suite of reports or pack or whatever you want to call it, is going to be February forecast. So I could look at my forecast budget, balance sheet or cash flow or full P&L or whatever. My full suite of reports are now available for the February forecast, but I'm not going to open any more up. I'm now going to copy the numbers from the budget into February forecast, and I'm going to do it for my full year. Yeah, technically I don't need to do it for January and February because I'm going to overlay those with actuals anyway. Just to note, if I had a year dimension, I could do long-term forecasting. Some of our, certainly in the housing association and asset side of the business, people have to do 35-year, or organisations have to do 35-year forecasts. I'm just going to do a 210 within the year. I'm going to transfer the data from my budget, lock, stock and barrel, into my February forecast. This takes about 10 seconds because we're taking around 120,000 numbers or records. You can see them going up here. I just think for demo purposes it's nice to see a lot coming across, a meaningful number, than just go, ding, there goes the 2 records. Yeah. So we're up to 50,000 almost already. You don't have to stop using it while it's doing this, but it does show you how quick data transfer is. Where are we? Up to about 70. Yeah, so that's the account cube is now moving on, as you can see, to the sales cube. And you can stop it taking data from specific cubes if you want to, but usually you want to redo your entire forecast. Yeah, so it's done that, nearly. Took about 8-10 seconds, but now when we go back, we will now have an entirely populated model in our February forecast. So if I look at my reports, there's that one, drill through, there's the volumes, okay, same as before, and just one other, there's that fella fully populated now, but the February forecast is the same as the budget. So the next step, and this can be used to do rolling forecasts or as a set period out as well. Next step, back here, better get some actuals in because we've got them. So we're going to overlay the first 2 months with actuals. Yeah. So it's only the first 2 months we want here. Yeah. And we'll do that transfer again. It'll be quicker this time because we're only bringing 2/12 of the numbers across. Yeah, that was quick. No, it hasn't. It's doing it. Where are we? We're nearly there. It's a lot quicker anyway. it'll freeze the actuals when you bring them in. Now, if you're always going to do a 210 or a 39 or something consistent, you can actually set up the steps that I've shown you just to be triggered when you bring your month end over. But if you're in a meeting and you can say already got a forecast and you want to do one that's more optimistic or pessimistic, you'd use something like this. So it's done that. So if I now come back here and look, I'm not going to open up all my reports. You can clearly see I purposely got my actuals as zeros here so you can see them, flush them out, and these numbers have changed. These are all frozen. My first 2 months are chosen. This one we can change. Yeah, and it's that straightforward. Yeah, and we can drive, and if we had a wider report for the rest of the year, we could change them, or we could splash average variance, or we could splash an increase of say 2% across the, for unit price for bananas until the end of the year. You can do whatever you want here, but it's that quick to create forecasts. Well, one thing I do want to show you before we say goodbye to the graphical front end, because we've only got about 10 minutes left, it's just this type of report that makes a lot of sense and is kind of best practice. Yeah, oh yeah, that's where I blew my my formatting a bit. So just reformat it. You can put auto format on as well. But these are my budget numbers. These are my actual numbers. But I've now got 2 drop downs of my version dimension. So what I can effectively do is compare any version with any version. So I've actually wanted to look at my February forecast against budget. There it is. Yeah, if I wanted to look at February forecast against, say, a more pessimistic one that I control or actual, there it is. Yeah, so you have control at your fingertips. It really is straightforward, and that's what you'd expect that to be because we copied the actuals in. But that's how easy it is to do it. If I had a year dimension, I'd probably want to look at something like actual, yeah, and then also have a drop down of year so you can compare year on year. When we produce systems, we tend to use this concept quite a lot because it makes sense to do so. So that's the forecasting piece, makes forecasting very straightforward. I'm now going to log on to the non-spreadsheet front end, and this is, we can mimic all those spreadsheets in here. I haven't, but we could do. But this is just the graphical front end that we suggest is probably a better option for your non-finance users because it isn't spreadsheets. Yeah, and if we just look at some of the reports, I've now got my summary P&L here. Yeah, and we can drill through to this, and again you see we put this type of concept on. So like a spreadsheet, but not a spreadsheet. But this time you can't add rows and columns. You can't key in over here. You are quite locked into to just the report. So there's my cash flow report, and you notice we have a consistent look and feel. If you wanted to do sort of graphical reports, we can do this sort of thing. We can drill on the graphics. We can do whatever level of graphics that you need. We can do product trends. You name it. We have a representation of the graphical here. It can also be drilling from maps as well, as I'll show you in a minute. We can also, interestingly enough, drill through all the way down to transactions if necessary, and those are transactions coming out of sum, yeah, or whatever your accounts package is. Another concept is workflow. We can set up workflow. We can do this in the spreadsheet front end, but this is a nicer environment. So what we can do is we can have a look at these numbers. Yeah, we can see clearly here that these are different phases of the budget. And the idea is you enter your numbers for one phase around authorizations. Yeah, you then submit them or authorize them, and it copies them across from phase 1 to phase 2 or from phase 2 to phase 3. Locks the old phase, so it's there for audit, but you've got the new phase. Yeah, we can send off alerts if people haven't entered their numbers. But we're just going to open this. I don't have any numbers here, and go into my data entry screen. So this sort of thing can be delivered in the browser, and if I'm an end user, I can just enter my numbers. It's just cleaner, if you will, than a spreadsheet, and it's not a spreadsheet. And we can still enter notes in a more controlled fashion, or we can perhaps copy numbers in to look from last year. I haven't actually got any last year's actuals in this case, but if I did, it would copy my numbers in. Let's just come out of there and go back to the workflow just to see. Maybe in this one we have some numbers. Yeah, so we'll copy last year's numbers. Yes, we've got some numbers there. That's much better. Just by way of a guide. Yeah, and it may be that we now want to use Splasher. So we go into this year. These are travel expenses. We've got lots of options here. We're going to have a bit of fun. So we're going to raise our travel expenses by 1,000%, and it just does it for you. It might raise eyebrows, or we may want to splash some numbers in there because we know in that quarter we're going to have some numbers, or put a number in there. Yeah, but the idea is once you're happy, submit. Yeah, and what it does is it locks these numbers. You can't change these. Around that submission authorization, yeah, you can see it's copied the numbers from phase 2. So we're moving through in a controlled fashion through the phases. And someone else can come along and change phase 2, but they can't change phase 1. What we have here, though, is a menuing system. We usually put KPIs on the front. We can make this menuing system look exactly what you want, but what it is access to a hierarchy of reports. What we can also provide, any report used in this, we can allow people to use with security. So if they're not allowed to see salary reports in their own dashboard that they can set up themselves. And I'm just going to come out of here and just show you, finish off with showing you what the dashboards can be like. So you save all your reports to a library. The library appears on the right, and people can drag reports into their own dashboard. You have security over that library, so if you don't want to see, say, salary reports or reports about that region, they just don't see them in the list to the left. So I'm just going to play this. Hopefully you can enjoy the jazz. This is actually on an iPad, but it can run on your PC. In a minute, what you'll see is the library of available reports that you've made available over to the left. This is the same graphical front end, but I've just put a black background on, and clearly they're high-level reports. They just snap to the grid, and the end user can do this themselves. Probably phase 2, but it's there if you want dashboards. And better than the static dashboards I showed you. Yeah, and even the infamous tweets you can have on there. Hopefully that's given you a flavour of what we can achieve. That didn't work very well. I just didn't quite come in where I meant to, but I'm going to hand over to Emma, and she can just field any questions, or if you want to just ask them, you'll feel free to ask them. What I've put down here, because I think this is quite interesting, if you are interested in it at this stage, what we often suggest is that you perhaps send us some of your spreadsheets. We can, maybe the spreadsheets that pertain to, I guess, a particularly problematic area of your budgeting or your forecasting process. With logic, we don't need your actual numbers, and we can put something together and then maybe do a more detailed demonstration, covering a little bit more than I covered today, and actually come out and see you. But over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Richard. Please can anyone let me know if you have any questions, either by raising your hand or by typing in a message on your keypad. A message came in earlier, Richard, from Chi, who would like to know, how would a changed budget number update in accounts?
Right, now that's an interesting point. What we do is, going back to that workflow, when you've authorised the budget number, we would then usually en masse batch put the number back into the accounts package. If you then go and change it, we can put the delta back into the accounts package, but we're doing it as quite a precise action. It's done in batch. We wouldn't recommend that, as you type in a number, it's changing in Sun, for instance. That feature is actually going to be, for Sun users, available. For users that use other financial packages, not. It's not necessarily something we would recommend. I would think it would be much better to authorize your budget as a whole and then put it lock, stock and barrel into Sun. And then if you do make changes throughout the year, or or post the sort of budget authorization, you can put those back to the appropriate slot in Sun. There are different ways of doing that. Yeah. but we wouldn't suggest that as you're making changes, you're pinging them each time after Sun. It's better to make, to do your budget, get the numbers in, get it authorized, and then put it lock, stock, and barrel back into the appropriate slot in Sun. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Thank you, Richard. Another question has come in from Anger, who would like to know, does it work with Access database?
Yep, any relational database, but it's got specific, for Access it's got specific links. So it'll run off any relational database. It's fully ODB and OLEDB compliant, and but it has got specific drivers for Access. We haven't really covered that, but that's the ETL tool, the extract, transform and load, and it's two-way. So it's what, I mean, thus far, and certainly for the foreseeable future, we're using that against Sun as well. But for Sun accounts, that will become more tightly coupled, getting on to what we were asked on the last question. But for Access, it's or Oracle or Progress or Ingress, yeah, or any other relational database for that matter, or spreadsheets and CSV files, there are specific drivers. But there's also ODBC, which is standard. So hopefully that's answered that question.
Thanks, Richard. There are currently no further questions.